Old mirror. It was about 5 years ago. At that time, I was attending a local university. It was summer vacation, and Harada, who went to school far away, said to me he called me and said, "I'm going back to my hometown." So we decided to play mahjong with 4 of my friends from junior high and high school. We gathered in Shimizu's room. Shimizu's room was a separate room, so it was okay to make a bit of noise, and we often hung out there since high school. The group consisted of me, Harada, Shimizu, and a guy named Ishikawa. After playing mahjong until dawn, we decided to go for a drive in Shimizu's car to refresh ourselves. Shimizu said, "Let's go to that Satyan's anyway." Shimizu said. When we were in high school, it was a hot spot among us. There was a religious institution in the mountains about 10 kilometers from Shimizu's house, and just around the time of the Om Shinrikyo incident, the religious group moved out of there to another place in the prefecture. The religious organization was a branch from a huge religious organization, and it followed the typical pattern of such cases. When they realized that the public did not understand their doctrine, they thought they were being persecuted, and they set up their base in a secluded place as if to run away. This is what they repeatedly did. After hearing a series of stories from Shimizu, we took the liberty of naming the facility Satyan, which we had never seen before, and for a while we developed a cult-like fantasy about it. We had talked about going there several times, but as we did not have a driver's license at the workshop, we did not have the means of transportation to get to the facility. But now we have Shimizu's car. You know the road, don't you? I heard it's a straight road once you get to the woods, so I'm sure it's fine. What if there's someone on the road? Then let's go get our weapons. Once he got out of the car, Shimizu brought a bat and a wooden sword from his room. Let's start the engine in case of emergency. Shimizu and Ishikawa were in high spirits. They had always been easygoing Yankees, and Harada and I had often been pushed around by them, but at this moment, I felt that I could count on them. By the time we entered the forest road, dawn had begun to break and the area became dimly lit. After about 20 minutes of driving through the mountains, we came across an old signboard. It was a large place where dozens of cars could be parked. In the darkness, I saw a concrete building in the back. The whole building looked modern or building-like, but the pillars were painted red and the roof was made of tiles, giving the building an odd impression. We immediately tried to break into the building, but the door was locked and the first floor windows had iron bars on them. Shimizu and Ishikawa beat on the door with baseball bats and wooden knives, broke the glass, and shouted loudly, but the place was quiet and nothing changed. We were all high after an all-nighter, but our tension was also on the decline. "Hey, there's a road this way. There's a road this way," Harada called from behind the building. We went to the back of the building and found a narrow mountain road leading deep into the forest. With our initial enthusiasm having failed, we decided to follow the path for the time being. After walking for a while, we came to an open area. The terrain there was a slight depression, and in the center was what looked like a small hut. The hut was a little strange. The walls were not vertical, but tilted and uneven, and the overall shape looked as if it were on the verge of collapse, as if a lump of dirt had been crushed and placed on top of it. The walls are not vertical, they're leaning and uneven. It's a weird door. There was an iron door that had been forced into the slanting wall. Let's open it. Shimizu grabbed the handle and pulled it open. It was even darker inside than outside, so it was hard to see what was going on. When Shimizu stepped in, he heard a sound like stepping on a pebble. "Wow, what is this? What the hell is this?" Shimizu shouted. When I, Ishikawa and Harada entered the room, we found Shimizu scrabbling the floor with his feet at the top of the stairs. I saw that the floor was made of old wooden boards, and there were many pieces of mirrors scattered around. He said, "Don't go in there. You'll get hurt." Ishikawa, who was wearing sandals, decided to wait outside, and Harada and I went up to the hut. As my eyes became accustomed, I began to understand what was inside. It was a small hut, about 10 tatami mats, with wooden walls and floor. It looked like a wooden hut that had been fortified from the outside with stone and concrete. The wood looked quite old, but there were no holes or cracks. "Hey, look up. Up there." Shimizu shined his flashlight upward and saw that there were no ceiling boards and a large beam with a tattered piece of cloth wrapped around it. Harada reached out, grabbed the hanging cloth, and tore it off. On the long, thin piece of cloth was written some unidentifiable words. "What's this? Can you read it?" Shimizu said. "Ah, these are the characters written in sutras and such." Shimizu put the rag in his pocket and shined it on the floor. The light from the flashlight shone on the shards of the mirror and reflected diffusely. "It's an amazing amount. All these shards." Holding the shards in my hands, I see that they are rusted yellow and brown, like old mirrors. All of them are cloudy and do not reflect clearly. I said to myself, "What's wrong? This one isn't broken." Shimizu said and pointed the flashlight to the corner of the room. There was a mirror there. It was an old-looking round mirror, and for some reason it was placed on a wooden stand. It reflected the light of the flashlight and illuminated Shimizu's face. At that time, I had a bad feeling. "Shimizu, let's not do this anymore." Harada thought the same thing and called out toward Shimizu. Shimizu did not reply. The light from the mirror was shimmering, and Shimizu's face looked speckled. For some reason, I couldn't bear to watch the scene and turned away. "Hey, Shimizu, stop it already." Harada seemed to be grabbing Shimizu's body from behind and shaking him. "No. No." I heard a strange groaning voice from behind. I couldn't take it anymore and tried to run outside. The doorway was right in front of me. I tried to run toward it, where Ishikawa's figure was silhouetted against the backlight, but my knees felt stiff and I couldn't move my legs well. It was like I was running away in a nightmare. "Hey! Somebody help me. There's something wrong with Shimizu." I heard Harada yelling, but I had no time to look back. I struggled to move my legs to get out anyway. "Hey, are you okay?" Ishikawa slipped over the side and ran to Shimizu. I finally got out and was on my butt on the ground when Harada and Ishikawa came out from inside carrying Shimizu. "Hey, you okay?" Ishikawa said to me. I was exhausted, but managed to shake my head. When Harada and Ishikawa let go of my hands, Shimizu sat down on the ground. Shimizu sat down on the ground. "Shimizu. Hey, Shimizu. Shimizu." Shimizu had his eyes closed and was drooling with his mouth open. And yet, he kept emitting a low growl as if his mouth was closed. The three of us carried Shimizu back to the car. Shimizu continued to growl all the way to the car, and I was so uncomfortable with it that I kept covering my ears the whole way. It was around 7 a.m. when I arrived at Shimizu's house. When I explained the situation to my father and auntie, who had just woken up, they were both in a panic and said they would take me to the hospital immediately. I thought I was going to get miffed, but all I heard from the old man was, "Go home for the day." I was relieved to hear that my father just told me to go home today. But after that, things were very difficult. There was even talk of the Shimizu family suing us, but somehow that story disappeared. The reason being, Shimizu's family had moved out of their hometown. I don't know what happened to Shimizu after that. But I think he is probably dead. That guy was looking in the mirror properly. There was no way he would get away with it. I had terrible leg pain after that. I am still lying at home or in a wheelchair about 300 days out of the year. I quit school and can't get a regular job because of it. The muscles in my legs have become so skinny that my trousers are so tight, it kind of makes me cry. Harada contracted rabies and died while on a business trip to Southeast Asia. He had been eating clay walls by scraping them off with his fingernails. Ishikawa was so frightened by what happened to the other three that he shut himself up in his house. According to what people have told me, he had a mental breakdown, but he was not taken to a hospital and has not left his house for a long time. What I am wondering now is who heard this story. On the way back from Shimizu's house, me, Harada, and Ishikawa decided that we would never tell anyone about what happened in that shack. Harada was the one who started it. Harada said that when he was trying to save Shimizu, he looked in the mirror for a moment. He didn't even tell us what he saw. Anyway, I followed the rule and didn't mention what happened in the hut to my parents or the police, and told them that Shimizu went into the hut alone, went crazy, and came out. But once 2 years ago, I met a woman in a chat room who was sensitive and curious about spirits and such, so we decided to meet in real life and talk about the cabin. I was sick on my feet at the time, so she came over to my place. She was dressed normally, not in black or anything, and she talked a lot about her favorite cars and movies. She was different from the image I had expected, so I told her about the cabin in a rather light-hearted manner. I still think you shouldn't talk about it with people, the woman said after she finished speaking. The tone of her voice has changed. She said, even after hearing it once, I can feel that things are very old-fashioned. These things are seriously dangerous. After a while, I couldn't reach her. She didn't answer when I called her cell phone, and she stopped texting me. She disappeared from the chat rooms where she used to be a regular, and the website she was running also disappeared without being updated. Since then, I have not talked about this to anyone. However, since the middle of April, the pain has spread to my hand. I decided to write it down as a record because I might not be able to move it anymore. This concludes this story. Thank you for listening to the end.